The story begins with a young man named Sammy, who is badly injured, arriving at a church with a broken guitar in his hand. Seeing Sammy in this condition, the people of the church become worried, and the church pastor starts praying for him. He tells Sammy to stay away from evil by abandoning music. Sammy was having strange nightmares here, indicating that something dangerous had happened the previous night. Right here, the scene cuts, and we are shown a scene from the day before. By the way, let me tell you that this story takes place from October 15th to 16th, 1932. Anyway, a day earlier, we see Sammy finishing his work and picking up his guitar at the church. Now, the pastor of their community church, whom we saw in the previous scene, is also Sammy's father. He was not happy with Sammy's hobby of music. In fact, he considered music a symbol of evil forces. But Sammy was not only fond of music, but he was also an exceptional talent in the blues music genre. According to many, blues is considered the foundation of modern genres like rock, jazz, and R&B. Anyway, from here, the scene shifts to focus on twin brothers named Smoke and Stuck. These two brothers are World War I veterans and have recently returned to their village in Mississippi. Before this, they were in Chicago, where they were part of gangs and made a lot of money. With this money, the two brothers want to open a juke joint in their village. A juke joint is like an informal place where there will be music, dance, drinks, and gambling. And it's mostly for the African American community, so they can have a good time after a long day's work. So, to open this juke joint, Smoke and Stuck buy a place from a white man named Hogwood, and we see that Hogwood was racist. I mean, he kept spitting after looking at the brothers and was surprised to see how much money they had. Even though the twins had so much money, Hogwood didn't respect them. Anyway, after buying the place, the two brothers go out to hire talent. I mean, if they are opening a juke joint, they will need some people to play music, right? So yes, first they recruit Sammy to sing and play guitar. We also understand that Sammy is their cousin. After this, Stuck and Sammy part ways from Smoke, and these two together hire a person named Delta Slim, who could play the harmonica or piano very well. Here, Sammy also interacts with a singer named Pearline, and it was clear that Pearline and Sammy liked each other. Now, Stuck also meets his ex-girlfriend Mary, who was quite upset with Stuck because she had waited for him for so long, but Stuck never connected with her after leaving. We also learn that Mary's mother had passed away just the day before. And Mary's mother was probably the one who looked after Stuck and Smoke for a few days in their childhood. By the way, Mary is kind of white. I say kind of because her parents were half black, and now she has become part of a kind of white people's community. Now, I am emphasizing the color here because the film also focuses on this a lot to clearly show the racism of the 1930s. We will talk a little more about this in the theory section. Anyway, Stuck takes Sammy and Delta Slim to a cotton field where he recruits his and Smoke's old friend Cornbread to be the doorman, for security, of the juke joint. There's a bouncer in a club, right? So here too, security is needed so that no one can just walk in. On the other hand, Smoke goes to town and hires the local Chinese shopkeepers Grace and Bo to handle the catering at the juke joint. Providing food and drinks to the customers, setting up the gambling scene, and so on. After this, Smoke goes to meet his wife, Annie, and we understand that although Smoke and Annie are still married, they have become quite distant from each other. Mostly, they used to fight over occult rituals. In fact, they are still arguing. Annie not only believed in occult rituals, but also practiced them. On the other hand, Smoke said that he had traveled the whole world in the war and had not seen a single ghost till today. On this, Annie says that she was doing some rituals so that these twins would always be safe. But Smoke angrily reminds her that if she knew so much about rituals, then why couldn't their little daughter be saved? This means, friends, that they also had a daughter who passed away shortly after birth. Here, we see that Smoke still wears the talisman given by Annie. In fact, after arguing, the two also become intimate here. Now, the story shifts its focus to a man named Remmick, who takes refuge in the home of a couple named Bert and John in a badly injured state. After some time, some vampire hunters arrive here looking for Remmick, and John lies to them, saying that no one has come to their house. Now, as soon as the sun sets, these vampire hunters leave, but Remmick, who was an Irish immigrant vampire, drinks Bert's blood and turns him into a vampire too. Yes, friends, seeing this, John screams, and the scene cuts, depicting that these people will also attack John, and in turn, John will also have become a vampire by now. Coming back to Stuck and Smoke, well, their hiding worked out perfectly because finally their juke joint was functional, and today was their opening night. We can see that although Stuck and Smoke are twins, their personalities were completely different. Like Smoke was very serious and business-minded, while Stuck was a more emotional and fun-loving person. Even at the juke joint, Smoke was very strict that everyone had to pay the entrance fee. And on this, we cannot have exceptions, nor can we reduce it. But Stuck and Annie explain to Smoke that the people in their community come here to enjoy themselves after working all day, so if they have a little less money, they should still be allowed to enter. Anyway, here at the juke joint, besides the owners, Stuck and Smoke, there were Sammy and Delta Slim who were performing. Then Annie, Mary, and Pearline had also come. Grace and Beau were looking after the food, drinks, and gambling scene. And who is on security? Of course, our cornbread. Now, these people were working here, but besides them, many customers had come here who were dancing, singing, eating, and drinking. In short, enjoying themselves. And overall, we can say that this juke joint had become a huge success on its very first day. So, after some time, Sammy starts performing the blues genre here. And his song was so true that we can even see the spirits of the past and present here. Yes, just like we were told in the movie's intro. Now, this performance was so powerful that Remmick also gets attracted to it, and now Remmick was accompanied by Bert and John as vampires. So what was said in the intro that such music also attracts evil was 100% right. So what happened next was that Remmick, along with Bert and John, comes outside, and he asks for permission to come inside. Remmick said that he was just attracted to Sammy's music and would come inside to spend money, enjoy, and sing with his friends. But Smoke and Stuck do not allow him to come inside. Why? Mostly because he was white, and he was also behaving a bit suspiciously. So, Remmick leaves from this point, but he goes a little further and starts singing with Bert and John. Now after this, some things happen inside the juke joint, such as Pearline and Sammy becoming intimate, then Mary has a little argument with Stuck, then there is also a bit of tension between Smoke and Sammy, and so on. After all this, when Mary goes out of the juke joint alone, she sees Remmick, Bert, and John there. These people show Mary gold coins, saying that they can give these to get entry into the joint. But while talking, Remmick's saliva, or spit, started dripping, indicating that he wanted to drink Mary's blood. Mary also senses that something is wrong. But before she could run away, Remmick attacks Mary. So yes, now Mary has also become a vampire, and in the next scene, she takes permission from Cornbread and enters the bar, then seduces Stuck. Now, as soon as Stuck and Mary become intimate, Mary bites him, causing Stuck to die. Just then, Smoke arrives here, and seeing all this, he shoots Mary several times. But Mary runs away from here laughing, as if the bullets had no effect on her. So now, seeing Stuck dead, Smoke was very emotional, and he tells the others to get everyone out of the juke joint. Annie immediately explains that this is mostly vampirism. That's why even bullets had no effect on Mary. Smoke didn't want to believe Annie's words, but he couldn't deny what he had seen with his own eyes. In the midst of all this, their security guy, Cornbread, goes out to pee, and Remmick attacks him there and turns him into a vampire too. Now, a little while later, Cornbread comes outside the juke joint, and he asks for permission to come inside. And Annie immediately points out how vampires cannot enter a house without permission. And because Cornbread is asking for permission, it means he has been converted. Cornbread immediately shifts the conversation, stating that he at least needs to be paid for today's work. As Smoke reaches out to give him the money, Cornbread tries to bite his hand, but Smoke dodges and attacks Cornbread instead. So yes, at this point, it was impossible to trust anyone because no one knew who had become a vampire. Meanwhile, Cornbread was still twitching even after being shot. In the midst of this, Stuck, who had died, suddenly rises as a vampire, but before he can attack anyone, Annie throws pickled garlic juice on him, causing him to burn strangely and flee. Now, Annie explains to the remaining survivors that vampires can only be killed with silver or a wooden stake, and garlic can repel them. In fact, no vampire can enter a building without being invited. Here, Annie also gives Smoke a talisman to protect himself, and she tells the people inside the bar to eat the garlic pickles to prove that everyone inside is human. Now, folks, many customers had come to the juke joint during the flood and were dancing, but they had been sent outside, right? Well, all of them had been attacked by vampires and had turned into vampires themselves, dancing and singing with Remmick. In fact, when Grace's husband Beau went outside to get the car, the vampires drank his blood and turned him into a vampire too. So we can say that only a few people were left who were human, and these were Smoke, Annie, Sammy, Delta Slim, Pearline, and Grace. In fact, all the remaining humans were inside the juke joint, while all the vampires were waiting for them outside the joint. Smoke and the team's plan was to spend the night there, and before morning, the vampires would have to flee because they mostly cannot survive in sunlight. Just then, Remmick comes to talk to them, and he starts convincing them how they should also become vampires. Remmick clearly states that vampirism is the right way for them because there is no discrimination there. They will get immortality, freedom, and there will be no racism of any kind. Remmick also reveals that John and Bert were actually from Hogwood's local clan, and their plan was to come in the morning, finish off Smoke and Stuck, and steal their money. This depicts how rampant racism was, and Smoke and Stuck were going to be attacked anyway, just because they were black and had somehow made money. In fact, we viewers also understand one more thing. The vampire who turns another into a vampire can access their memories. For example, Remmick was able to see John and Bert's memories, which is how he found out about this. So yeah, Remmick's basic point was that, anyhow, Smoke and Stuck were going to be killed the next morning, and society would never respect them no matter how much money they earned, so it would be better to embrace vampirism. By the way, Stuck had already become a vampire, and he was very happy with Mary, who was also a vampire, but Remmick wanted to turn Smoke and whoever else was left with him into vampires as well. Now, this offer was tempting, but Smoke and the others did not accept it. In such a situation, Remmick says that he only needs Sammy, after which he will leave them alone. Actually, Sammy's song had the magic that could move even the old and new spirits, and Remmick was very impressed by this. So yes, he wanted Sammy, but of course, these people do not hand over Sammy, which indicates that a full-on war was about to happen. Here, Grace was very upset about Beau's death, and rubbing salt in the wound, Remmick says that he will attack Grace's daughter, who is currently at Grace's house. Hearing this, Grace loses her temper, and she challenges the vampires. Now that they have been challenged, the vampires can come inside, because this is a kind of invitation. And then, a real full-blown war begins here. In this scuffle, Annie, Grace, and Delta Slim are all killed. In fact, Delta Slim sacrifices himself to save Sammy, Smoke, and Pearline. No Mary, who is already a vampire, is devastated by Annie's death and runs away in shock. This was very sad because Stuck had bitten Annie, turning her into a vampire as well. And in such a situation, Smoke had to put a wooden stake into Annie with his own hands, which was very emotional. After this, Sammy and Pearline try to escape from there, but Remmick and Stuck surround them in the middle of the road. Smoke also arrives there, and then a brutal fight ensues between Smoke and Stuck, while Sammy and Pearline face Remmick. In the fight, Pearline gets bitten by a vampire, and before dying, she pleads with Sammy to save his life and run away. Sammy also tries to escape by car, but Remmick blocks his path. Here, all the vampires were standing with Remmick, and Sammy's end was near. But at the last moment, Sammy picks up his guitar and smashes it over Remmick's head. And mostly, Sammy's guitar had a silver plate, which gets embedded in Remmick's head. This doesn't kill Remmick, but it causes him a lot of pain. In fact, we see the other converted vampires also writhing in pain. Now, before Remmick could retaliate, Smoke arrives there and finally finishes off Remmick with a wooden stake. Just a few seconds later, the sun starts to rise, and all the vampires burn to ashes. If you remember, Smoke had clashed with his brother Stuck, and Stuck was a vampire. In that fight, Smoke was about to finish off Stuck as well, but we are not shown whether Stuck was actually killed. So yes, if you have a question in your mind about what happened to Stuck, well, you will get clarity on this in a little while. Anyway, Smoke tells Sammy to run quickly because as soon as it is morning, Hogwood and his clan were going to come here. Sammy runs, and just a little while later, Hogwood and his clan arrive here. Smoke is alone here with his guns and confronts them. In fact, he shoots them all down, although in this fight, he himself gets badly injured. And in his last breaths, he sees a loving vision of Annie and his daughter, And in the end, he dies due to his injuries. Meanwhile, Sammy, who is tired and grief-stricken, returns to his father's church. Now, folks, this is the same first scene of the movie that I narrated to you initially. Sammy's father, who is the pastor, tells him to choose salvation by abandoning music. But Sammy refuses and picks up his guitar, leaving the church. Only the handle of the guitar was left. The movie ends right here. Now, folks, there is a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene in the film. The mid-credit scene is very important, which I will tell you about now, but the post-credit scene is nothing special, although I will tell you about that too here. So, the mid-credit scene is 60 years later. That is 1992, when we are shown a scene from Chicago. Here we see an old Sammy who has now become a famous blues musician. Now, Stuck and Mary come to meet him here. Yes, friends, Stuck reveals that on that night at the juke joint, Smoke had spared his life, but Smoke had laid down a condition. The condition was that Stuck would always let Sammy live a peaceful life. So Stuck kept his promise, and he never harmed Sammy. Although now Stuck and Mary offer Sammy immortality. That is, they offer to turn him into a vampire. Why? Because Sammy was not going to live much longer due to his old age. In fact, we see Stuck and Mary who look the same even after 60 years as they did in 1932. Ek them young. Although their fashion sense is now from the 90s. When Sammy is offered immortality, Sammy politely declines it. Before leaving, Stuck asks him to sing a song, and Sammy picks up his guitar and starts playing. When Stuck and Mary start to leave, Sammy tells them that even today, the nightmares of that night don't leave him. But he also remembers that the day before that night was the best day of his life. Stuck also agrees and says that it was his best day too, because it was the last day he saw his brother for the last time. Then that was the last day Stuck could feel the sunlight, and it was the last day Stuck had real freedom. The mid-credit scene ends right here. And in the post-credit scene, we see a young Sammy playing the guitar, and this day was mostly the day before that night. I mean, the dreadful night I was talking about, the 1932 one. The movie ends here.